Hey there, how there, ho there. It's Jeff Cutter Dad. Welcome you to yet another Cutter Top 10 video. And today we delve into basketball. We are going to be doing the Cutter Top 10 NBA teams that sucked, or the worst, the top 10 worst NBA teams of all time, if you put it that way, too. Of course, rocking the Toronto Raptor basketball and all that. And no, despite my best efforts, none of the Toronto Raptors teams made it into this top 10 because the fact that the 1997 Raptors, even though they only won like 16 games, did not make it. They weren't that terrible. There is a Vancouver Grizzlies team on this list. So here we go. Here's the list from 10 to 1. Number 10 is the 1983 Houston Rockets. The Rockets, this was their 12th season in Houston. They used to play in San Diego, then they went to Houston. In the draft, they took from Baylor Terry Teagle and Chuck Nevitt from NC State. Of course, that was the year before NC State were the champs. So the Houston Rockets roster didn't really have a lot of key players. They had Elvin Hayes, the Big E, still on the team, and Calvin Murphy, one of the greatest free throw shooters of all time, and Robert Reed, not from the Brady Bunch. But the Rockets were 14-68. They were pathetic. They were worst in their conference by a country mile. The San Diego Clippers were second last with 25 wins. The good news for the 1983 Rockets was that this poor season actually got them the number one draft pick, and they took Ralph Sampson from the University of Virginia, who was an icon and all that. And then in 1984, after starting out decently, Houston, for some stupid reason, decided to tank so that they could win the coin flip and get Hakeem Olajuwon from the University of Houston. I mean, local product. It worked. However, the NBA decided to institute the famed draft lottery the next season to prevent this from happening again. Uh, yeah, number 9 is the 1999 Vancouver Grizzlies. Told you there would be a Vancouver Grizzlies team here. The 1999 Grizzlies were in their, well, this was the fourth season in Vancouver and all that. And they just couldn't get anything going. They did get the number 2 pick in 1998 in the draft, and they got Mike Bibby, which was impressive. They picked up Felipe Lopez from the San Antonio Spurs and signed Cherokee Parks, former Duke icon. They were 4-6 in their first 10 games. They were doing okay, but then had a 13-game losing streak. And as Bryant Reeves would actually end up having a knee injury, which ruined him. All that. The Grizzlies ended up being 8-42. It's the lowest amount of victories by a team in a season since the NBA's inception. And all that. When the Providence Steamrollers won 6 games in 1948, it was when the league was the Basketball Association of America, not the NBA. However, the 2012 Charlotte Bobcats actually broke that record and all that. Sure, Abdul Rahim did pretty well, getting 23 points per game, and Mike Bibby was on the All NBA rookie team. Tony Massenberg had done pretty well. Brian Reeves, when he was healthy, was okay. And then later in the season, Tony Massenberg would be traded to Houston. 3 players would be traded to Orlando, who then released the players to free agency after that. Yeah, sure. If you had Mike Bibby, you had Felipe Lopez, you had Tony Massenberg, Lee Mary from Arkansas, woo, Cherokee Parks, Bryant Reeves, and all that. So anyway, the regular season was low and all that. That was just not good. Their 160 win percentage was their lowest in history and all that. And this is coming off, well, in 96, they had a 23-game losing streak, but they had a better streak and all that. So Vancouver would only win 1 game on the road, and that was against the Clippers in February. The 99 Grizzlies actually faced off against the Raptors in the first ever basketball game at the Air Canada Center. This would actually be good news as Vancouver would have a low pick, but then the Chicago Bulls somehow got the number 1 draft pick. Vancouver would be picking number 2 and all that. Unfortunately, though, the massive move was that Well, Steve Francis from Maryland was picked number 2 behind Elton Brand. He cried because he swore Chicago made a stupid move taking Elton Brand instead of him. Steve Francis refused to play for Vancouver because of taxes, God's will. He didn't want to be far from Maryland and all that. He didn't want to pay taxes and no endorsements. His whining led to a 3-team 11-player deal that sent Steve Francis to Houston, and he became co-NBA MVP. I mean, Rookie of the Year. What am I saying? Number 8 is the 1987 LA Clippers. This was the third season that the LA Clippers were in LA. They were once called the Buffalo Braves, and then they moved to San Diego, become the San Diego Clippers. Then they're the LA Clippers. They were 12-70, worst winning percentage in team history, and of course the worst in the Donald Sterling era. Yeah, they're 5 draft picks. They didn't even have a top 2 round draft pick of all that. I wonder what did they have like the number 2 pick? The Clippers actually had the number 1 pick for the 86 draft, but through Philly, it went to Cleveland, and Brad Daugherty was picked. Yeah, so the LA Clippers actually had done all that. And then the Clippers traded to Portland, the 24th pick, which is Argenis Sabonis. So yeah, the LA Clippers didn't really have much for draft picks and all that. They had Benoit Benjamin, the decent center with 0-0. Michael Cage, who was pretty good from San Diego State. They had Larry Drew, future NBA head coach. They had Marcus Johnson, UCLA icon. They had Norm Nixon, great player, and Mike Woodson, future NBA coach. Clippers won 12 games. They were way back. There were 16 games. They had 12 wins. Second last in the conference was San Antonio with 28 wins. That's 16 back. So the Clippers seem to be A-okay and all that. I mean, they picked up a couple picks from Sacramento for Derek Smith and Junior Bridgman, among others. Junior Bridgman recently deceased. Clippers traded Cedric Cornbread Maxwell to Houston for a couple of draft picks and all that. Unfortunately, the 1987 draft, the Clippers wouldn't get the number 1 pick in the 1987 draft. That would actually, they ended up falling 4th. The draft lottery screwed them over. All that, as they were drafted behind San Antonio, Phoenix, and New Jersey. They got Reggie Williams, who was kind of a bust, if you will. Although the number 2 pick, Arm Gilliam from UNLV, went to Phoenix, and number 3, Dennis Hobson in New Jersey from Ohio State. They sucked. But the number 1 pick in that 1987 draft was David Robinson from San Antonio. San Antonio ended up winning the draft. And then James Brown asked him the San Antonio GM point blank, saying, about the whole 2-year Navy commitment and all that. Are you going to draft him? And then the guy says, well, we've waited 14 years. What's 2 more? So they were willing to wait. Number 7 is the 2014 Milwaukee Bucks. And yes, this team did have Giannis on the team. In fact, Giannis was drafted 15th overall in the 2013 NBA draft. I mean, let's look at all the players that were drafted. Well, Anthony Bennett was picked 1st overall. That didn't work out. Victor Oladipo went 2nd to Orlando. That went well. Otto Porter? Not really. Cody Seller? Alex Len? Boo. Nerlens Noel? Yeah, he was okay. Ben McLemore? He was good for a few seasons. Kentavious Caldwell Pope? Trey Burke? No. CJ McCollum? Yeah, it was all right. Michael Carter Williams? Decent. Steven Adams? From New Zealand? Okay. Kelly Olynyk from Canada? Going 13th overall. He ended up being a good player. And Shabazz Muhammad. I was thinking to myself, wasn't Giannis the pick that was made and the pizza commercial came on or something like that? I don't remember. Yeah, I don't remember if he was picked during a pizza commercial or something like that. But anyway, yeah, he was picked. He would join Carlos Delvino, Brendan Knight, OJ Mayo, good guy from USC, Chris Middleton, Sasha Pachulia, and a few other people. So they picked up Giannis Antetokounmpo. They ended up being 15-67, last in the Central, and last in the East behind Philadelphia, who had 19 wins that year. So yeah, so Milwaukee only had 15 wins. Giannis would play 77 games, starting only 23 of them, having a decent 6.8 points per game. But remember, that was his rookie campaign. He would do much better. Things happen. Milwaukee traded away Luke Muboa Mote, former UCLA star, to Sacramento for a draft pick. They trade Brandon Jennings to Detroit for Knight, Middleton, and Kravtsov. They would trade Ish Smith to Phoenix for Caron Butler. And then they traded Luke Runauer to the Bobcats. So yeah, so they did well in free agency, but not so much. Fortunately for Giannis, his growing pains would actually be better. Number 6 is the 2016 Sixers in the process era and all that. They knew they had a lot of um, process and all that. Of course, that's when the Sixers kind of not tanked for stuff, and they said they would be doing too well. They had a 28-game losing streak that stretched over 2 seasons. That's not the record, of course. So the 2016 Sixers had all that. And unfortunately, Joel Embiid, who was the third pick in the 2014 draft, again would have to miss out due to a leg injury. So he missed 2 straight seasons. Philly lost 27 games over the 2 seasons and all that. They did beat the Lakers, and it was actually Kobe's last game in Philadelphia against the Sixers. Philly would hire Jerry Colangelo as their GM, mostly due to the fact that Sam Hinkle actually wanted to do the process and all that because of the whole thing with the purposely tanking and all that. But they did win 10 games. They missed the the most losses in one season was 73. It's weird that, we almost saw the most losses in an NBA season the same year as the most wins in an NBA regular season, because you know about Golden State. But Sim Hinkle's goal of the process actually happened because they got Ben Simmons from Australia and the University of LSU. Julio Okafor, third pick from Duke, it seemed to be okay, but it didn't work out. And they had 5 second-round picks, led by Willie Hernangomez. So in the regular season, they sucked. They had an 0-18 start to the season. They won 4 in January, but 3 the rest of the year. 10 wins. Their second last was 21 by Brooklyn. Elton Brand played for that team. Yeah, the first pick in 1999 about the Steve Francis thing. Joel Embiid could have played, but he was hurt. Carl Landry, TJ McConnell, Nerlens Noel, good player. Julio Okafor, Ish Smith, Nick Stockus, Canadian, and all that. But yeah, Okafor and TJ McConnell both won Rookie of the Month in the Eastern Conference, and Okafor was named to the All NBA First Team. So it all worked out. They did their job. They did lose Baba Mute to LA. Jason Richardson, who was the 2-time slam dunk champion. Gerald Wallace was waived. And Sonny Weems from Arkansas was doomed. But yeah, the process, that was their worst season. Number 5 is the 2024 Detroit Pistons in the year of the 28-game losing streak. They actually were low on this list, lower than like top 3, because they won 14 games, whereas the other 4 teams on this list have won fewer. So yeah, they had a 28-game losing streak. Hard to believe. They actually, with their 14 wins, that actually became the worst team in Pistons history. In fact, well, it surpassed the 1980 season that had 16 wins and had Dick Vitalis coach for a while. So anyway, yeah, Dwayne Casey resigned as head coach April 10th, 2023, before the season, so Monty Williams came in. They actually started off 2-1 and then lost 20 in a row between October 30th and December 30th. Although their home attendance wasn't that bad, 18,000. They didn't really have much. They did have the 5th overall pick and picked Arthur Thompson from the G League, all that, but didn't work out. The 2024 Pistons had Cade Cunningham. I believe this was his second season. Malachi Flynn also was on the team. Evan Fournier, Taj Gibson, Jaden Ivey from Purdue, Isaiah Stewart from Washington, and James Wiseman from Memphis. So yeah, they were 14 and 68. They were only one game behind Washington for the worst mark in the Eastern Conference, but they did all that. They did the in-season tournament, but they were 0 and 4. So yeah, 28 straight losses. Can you believe it? They had a lot of trades. They got rid of Marvin Bagley III to Washington for Daniel Gallinari. Bojan Bogdanovic went from Detroit to New York for Flynn and Fournier. Yeah, they wanted to shake things up. Shake, shake, shake. Corey Joseph left Detroit for Golden State. They waived a lot of players too. But yeah. So the 2024 Pistons. I think it's the number one pick. I can't remember. It doesn't matter. Does it? Does it? Number 4, it's the 1998 Denver Nuggets with 11 wins. They had terrible losing streaks and frequent blowouts. They got the 5th pick in the 97 draft and took Tony Battie, who would be much better for Boston. Boston. They got Joe Wolf. They got Danny Fortson from Milwaukee. Bobby Jackson and all that. However, Eric Williams had a devastating knee injury after just 4 games. And Brian Stiff got injured. So they set many records. They actually lost the first 12 games under Phil Henselick, who used to play for the Nuggets. They only won 11 games, which was the team's worst record in franchise history, and the third fewest in a full 82-game season. So anyway, it's weird how shitty their team was, but the football team was much better. They won the Super Bowl, and I think they won more than 11 games. They actually were 2 and 38 to start a 40-game campaign. Only the 94 Nuggets were that bad. So yeah, they got lucky. They won 11 games. So yeah, there were some moves and all that. So yeah, Battie and all that. Alongside Corey Alexander, Alfonso Alves, Danny Fortson, Dean Garrett, Bobby Jackson, and Brian Stiff. 11 wins. Second last in the West that year was the Clippers. I forget how the 98 Nuggets got in the draft. I think they were like third. I think they were third in the draft or something, right? I don't think they were number 1. No, they ended up being number 3. The Clippers and Grizzlies beat them in the draft lottery. And it was Ola Candy and Mike Bibby. Ray LaFrance went to Denver. That's not half bad. I mean, at least there's a consolation prize. Number 3 is the 1993 Dallas Mavericks, who were brutal. They had a 20-game losing streak. They had that 134 winning percentage, 11 and 71. They had the 4th pick in the 92 draft and took Jim Jackson, which was a smart move because he was good too. Unfortunately, Jim Jackson decided to have a contract dispute and all that. And Fat Lever, legendary Nugget, actually had to be out with a knee injury. They started out okay. They were 4 and 57 through 61, and it looked like they were going to basically get the worst record ever. However, they did win 7 games after March, after Jim Jackson finally signed with the Mavericks and played the final 28 games of the season. And they helped them win 7 games to get to 11 wins and avoid the worst mark in NBA history for a full season. Derek Harper was still around. He was a Dallas icon. Surprised he stayed for the whole game and all that. Yeah. Yeah, Kyle Wright, NBA historian, says that the 93 Mavs were the worst because of the point differential. So, yeah, Jim Jackson, Sean Rex. They also had Terry Davis, Derek Harper on the team, Tim Jackson, Tim Legler, star from LaSalle, Fat Lever, who was an icon, but I think he retired, Sean Rooks, and all that. Yeah, 11 wins. Minnesota had 19 for contracts. So yeah, Minnesota. Yeah, Dallas did a little better later on, and I believe they didn't get the first pick in the '94 draft, right? Well, they had the fourth pick. They had won 11 games, but the draft lottery didn't help them. That was the draft lottery that saw Shaq. I mean, Orlando pick, go number one, and the whole go figure thing. Yeah, they got Jamal Mashburn, which was good. All that. Number two is the 2012 Charlotte Bobcats. Yes, their 106 winning percentage is the worst in NBA history, but why are they not number one? Because those numbers were not during the full regular season. An 82 game regular season? No, it was 66 games because of a lockout. The Bobcats were 7-59 and started on Christmas Day. All that. They had a terrible winning percentage and all that, but they still technically, yeah, all that. But yeah, they had a 23 game losing streak, but that wasn't the worst in history. They had Bismack Biyombo, who was good from the Dominican Republic, not the Democratic Republic of Congo. Biyombo would be much better as a Toronto Raptor. And Kemba Walker was picked ninth overall. I was pissed off when the Raptors didn't take Kemba Walker. I wanted Kemba Walker on their team. The Raptors went fifth, and that was when they picked up that guy with the terrible name, Jonas Valanciunas. I wanted I wanted Kemba Walker because Kemba Walker led UConn to an improbable NCAA tournament win. I was steaming, but a few years later, Valanciunas' performance made me eat some fucking crow. Bismack Biyombo, Desanya Diop was on that team. Gerald Henderson, great player. Corey McGetty, former Duke icon, good clipper. Jamario Moon, who was a Raptor at one point. Eduardo Nahara, Kemba Walker, and DJ White. They had 7 wins. Washington was second worst with 20 in the Eastern Conference. They had an 0-16 April. So that tells you all you have to know about this team and all that. When they picked the Bobcats picked up Corey McGetty from Milwaukee and the draft rights to Biyombo. They traded away Steven Jackson, Sean Livingston, and a few other key pieces. They traded away John Solomons and the draft rights to Jimmer Fredette to Sacramento. It actually worked out quite well. Kwame Brown went to Golden State and Joe Prospilla to Portland, which was great and all that. So, anyway, and number one is the 1973 Philadelphia 76ers. They were terrible. 9-73, a 110 winning percentage. They really sucked and all that. Poor management and roster instability did them in. They had a 20 game losing streak, which was the record at the time in 1973, and then broken by the 2024 Pistons with 28. So, yeah, they lost the first 15 games. So they were 9-73. They actually ended up losing 34 out of 35 games at one point. But yeah, it's the worst amount of wins for a team in a full season. It's kind of crappy and all that. The Sixers actually had the most wins in a season and the highest win percentage 6 years earlier, but now they're really falling off the list. The Sixers actually wanted Al McGuire or Adolph Ruff to leave college to join the in the NBA, but they both refused the job. So yeah. So Fred Carter from Mount St. Mary's. Hal Greer, the legendary Hal Greer, was still playing from the 1967 roster that won the title, but 6 years later he was playing for the worst team in a full season. Kevin Lockery, Mike Price, Tom Van Arsdale, former Phoenix icon. Yeah. So yeah, the a lot of the '67 championship team was gone by the start of '72 season. Jack Ramsey went to play to coach for Buffalo. Billy Cunningham went to the ABA, and Hal Greer was just there. Management actually placed added in the Philadelphia Inquirer looking for a head coach, which was weird. Kevin Loughery actually picked up for Roy Rubin and all of that. The team actually were 5-2 in the final 2 weeks of February. So they were 4-58. But surprisingly, won 5 out of 7 games. They still won 9. It was pathetic and all of that. Yeah, the demise was practically due to the Will Chamberlain trade to the Lakers, and everything just fumbled. All that. The Sixers fortunately got better in a sense, but it took a while. So anyway, that's the top 10 worst NBA teams of all time. I'm Jeff Diamond. Adieu.